Republicans claim a victory in their long crusade to dismantle Obamacare, but Democrats insist they will pay dearly for it in the midterm elections. I'm Julie Banderas. This is the Fox Report. The bill to repeal and replace Obamacare now moves to the other side of the Capitol, where Republican senators will certainly take a red pen to it or even start from scratch. The measure squeaked through the House by 2 votes, with its champion Paul Ryan walking a tightrope between conservatives and moderate Republicans. Many supporters confessed they're not sure what's in the bill or its impact on American voters. No matter what, though, President Trump viewed the passage as a big win, celebrating with a news conference and show of Republican unity in the White House Rose Garden. But the bill's path through the Senate promises to be long and twisting.
The Senate has trapped the animal and will now kill it with clubs. It's what they're going to do. So you strip out the bill, they'll put in their version, which will be the cuts to Obamacare will be much smaller, I would expect, under the Senate version, and then they will shoot it back to the House, and the House will say, this is terrible, we'll never pass this, and then they go into conference. That's why I say many months are ahead. But at least for the Republicans, they can say, we said we'd do it, we did it, in the House at least, and they can now start talking about taxes and things people like.
You're right.
We begin our coverage with the latest maneuvering by the White House and Brian Yennis, who is following President Trump this weekend at his New Jersey golf club. So has the president indicated, Brian, how far he is willing to compromise on a final health care bill?
Good evening, Julie. Well, the White House has said that the president fully expects there to be changes made to the final health care bill, so long as it really includes the 3 main pillars that they like, which is lower costs for Americans, a competitive insurance marketplace, as well as flexibility for states to decide what coverage they want to offer their residents. But as you noted in that intro, Julie, this is going to be a tough sell. Senate Republicans already saying they're going to come up with their own bill. They're referencing things like pre-existing conditions, the cost of coverage for those with pre-existing conditions being too high under this bill, as well as Medicaid cuts, which could leave millions of Americans without insurance that got insurance under the Obamacare Medicaid expansion. So a tough climb still left, but the White House says, look, they don't have any timetable or deadline, and they are willing to see the legislative process play out.
The president's focused on getting it right, not getting it fast. I think we saw the mistake that the Democrats made by trying to force and rush this through. We're taking the appropriate steps to make sure that the American people get the health care system they deserve, and that's the president's commitment, not an artificial timeline.
Yesterday, the president continued his victory tour, so to speak, in his weekly address while pressuring the Senate to just get it done. This was a major legislative victory for Mr. Trump, following up on a Republican promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. The president likes that the bill will eliminate Obamacare taxes and regulations, and that refundable tax credits and expanded health savings accounts will give consumers choice and flexibility in buying coverage. But still, he voiced, Julie, frustration in a few tweets yesterday, saying that he believes people are being too critical of a bill that he sees is clearly better than Obamacare, which is currently in place. Julie?
And so to what extent will the president personally be getting involved to get this bill passed?
The White House says the president will continue to be hands-on. Remember, reportedly, he took the first loss when this health care bill went through the House and failed personally. And this time around, he made phone calls and pressured Republicans in the House to get it done. And former Trump advisor Corey Lewandowski, well, he says that he expects the same thing from the president this time around when it comes to the Senate bill.
He's going to be working the phones. He's going to be meeting with individuals, I'm sure, in the U.S. Senate to get a piece of legislation done. If he's required to go out and campaign and get on the stump like he did in Harrisburg last weekend to push his bill forward to make sure we can get repeal and replace done, he's willing to do that. And he has a great microphone to bypass the mainstream media, the fake news. He can go directly to the American people and put pressure on those U.S. senators who aren't willing to hold to their promise to get repeal and replace done.
Meantime, the president visiting here in Bedminster, New Jersey at his golf club for the first time while he's in office, and there were some protests here. A handful of protesters, pro and anti-Trump, that showed up 4 miles away from the golf club. And also, we do have a tweet, the first tweet of the weekend, actually, from the president regarding his visit here to Bedminster. Remember, he was getting some pushback for taking all these trips to the South White House in Mar-a-Lago and now appear to the Winter White House in Mar-a-Lago and now appear to what's being dubbed the Summer White House in Bedminster. Well, he tweeted, "The reason I'm staying in Bedminster, New Jersey, a beautiful community, is that staying in New York City is much more expensive and disruptive." Meetings. That a clear response to those who are saying that he should stay at the White House to do his job as opposed to coming up here and wasting taxpayer money. He doesn't see it that way. Julie?
All right, Brian Yennis there in New Jersey. Thank you very much, Brian. So within hours of passing the health care bill, House lawmakers checked out for a week-long recess. But senators will be working out and begin to put together their version of the legislation next week. Many say, though, that they're going to be digging deeper into its impact with an eye on safeguarding the more popular elements of Obamacare. Ellison Barber has more on the approaching debate.
Julie, supporters of the bill in the House celebrated its passage in a big way at the Rose Garden with the president, but that is just the first step. In the Senate, the debate is only beginning.
Well, the Senate will write its own bill. I mean, that's the way it works, right? And so they'll pass theirs, we'll pass ours, and then we'll go to conference.
The House passed their bill Thursday without a full report from the Congressional Budget Office. Some on the left, like Senator Tim Kaine, say for starters, they need to see the estimated cost.
They rushed through a bill without knowing how many millions of people it would hurt, without knowing how much it would cost, without a protection for people with pre-existing conditions.
And quite a few Republicans are looking at it with caution.
Part of the problem I have is that the underlying premise of Obamacare was that the federal government would, for the first time, buy insurance for people. That fundamental premise of Obamacare is kept.
Some of the things we're going to have to work on, for example, are the refundable tax credit. We need to make sure that that's sufficient so that low-income people can actually buy a policy.
We will work together carefully to write our own bill. We will make sure we know what our bill costs.
Special budget rules allow the Senate to pass health care with just 51 votes, but Republicans probably need some help from Democrats. Republicans have the majority in the Senate, but it's not as big as the majority they have over in the House. The Senate is in D.C. this week. The House is on recess, which means they'll most likely hear opinions from people back home. Julie?
All right. Thank you so much, Ellison Barber. Well, France investigating a cyber attack targeting presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron. Hackers posting what appear to be stolen emails and fake information from Macron's campaign. Now, the leak comes as the country prepares for tomorrow's highly anticipated runoff election, pitting the centrist Macron against the far-right candidate. Well, meantime, House Armed Services Committee ranking member Adam Smith is calling on our president to condemn the cyber attack, saying in part, and I quote, "If we do not meet this ongoing intentional campaign to undermine representative democracy around the world with effective resistance, we stand to lose much of what we value and what we have sacrificed for as a nation. I call on President Trump to respond forcefully to this attack. He must not downplay, ignore, or encourage such an assault." Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott has more.
Julie, it sounds like something right out of last year's U.S. presidential election. French presidential leader Emmanuel Macron hit by a cyber data dump. Thousands of emails and documents seized from the campaign, posted online. Most of the material said to be routine, but according to authorities, it was mixed with fake news items, and that seems meant to sway this election. So far, we haven't seen a major impact on front-runner Macron. He is a centrist, an independent, a reformer. He's pro-EU, pro-NATO, and he has over a 20% lead in the polls over his rival, far-right populist candidate Marine Le Pen. She is anti-EU, anti-immigrant. She says she is for France. Now, Le Pen's campaign manager tweeted positively today about the leak. Le Pen's positive tone to Moscow has some thinking about a Russian connection reminiscent of last year's tampering, allegedly, with the Hillary Clinton campaign. Now, we spoke with folks on the street here in Paris, and not many had heard about the hack. Here in liberal Paris, we heard a lot of support for Macron. In the heartland of France, where the economy is really slammed, Le Pen's nationalist message is playing well. We did hear, though, from a lot of people here, some people at least today, who weren't favorable to either candidate, and that could play a role as well. Now, no major party candidate is in this runoff. They got knocked off in the first round of elections, but this election is so important that major figures in the United States are weighing in. Former President Obama taping a message of support for Macron. President Trump has spoken in the past favorably about Le Pen. The White House now says that it will work with whoever wins on Sunday. Julie.
Greg Palcott, thank you. A Fox News alert and breaking news. Some of the Nigerian girls kidnapped by the terror group Boko Haram years ago, in fact, back in 2014, have finally been released. Only some of the girls, though, I should say, because reports are saying at least 62 of the girls kidnapped in northern Nigeria were released through negotiations with the Nigerian government. Exactly what those negotiations were, we do not know. We do know this, that more than 200 girls total were kidnapped by Boko Haram militants back in 2014. Some of them have already been released or escaped their captors. The last major release was back in October, but many are still in the hands of the extreme Islamic terror group. An apparent random attack and a single strike from a stranger ends the life of a father of 5. Well, now Las Vegas officials and the victim's family are on a desperate search for the suspects caught on camera for the attack. Plus, when the president comes to town, his safety is top priority. And we have got behind-the-scene pictures at exactly how New York City prepared for his return this week. Next.
We're protecting a building that went from being one of the buildings on Fifth Avenue to what could be argued is now a symbolic target.
Hello, I'm Dr. Manny. I'm here to answer your questions. There's a new trend in the beauty world. It's called the no-poo method. We got this email from a viewer.
Dear Dr. Manny, I've read that my hair will be healthier if I stop shampooing it every day. Is this true? And what about using dry shampoo? Thanks.
Celebrities have been talking about this trend for a while now, ditching your regular shampoo routine to maintain your hair's natural oils. Remember, the scalp has different oils than the rest of the body. It can tend to build up and allow for overgrowth of bacteria and yeast. When that bacteria grows, it can cause dandruff, itchy scalp, flaking scalp, and even hair loss. Dermatologists say you shouldn't stretch your shampoos more than 2 to 3 days, but this can vary depending on your hair type. The most important thing to remember about shampooing is that it removes dead skin cells and excess oil, which prevents dandruff. As far as dry shampoos go, they aren't a substitute for the real thing. For more, we checked in with an expert.
Those do absorb some of the oil, but they also sit on the scalp and allow the oil to stay there and, again, the yeast and the bacteria to overgrow. So use those sparingly.
Thanks. Do you have a health question? Tweet me at Dr. Manny on Fox. Until next time, I'm Dr. Manny.
The change in seasons can be a burden for those who suffer from seasonal allergies. While colder weather often brings relief if you suffer from outdoor allergies, some doctors say it could bring problems for indoor allergy sufferers.
If they have indoor allergens related to animal dander, to the dust mites, and some people have problems with cockroaches, that exposure is just going to be higher, and they'll have more symptoms related to being indoors rather than outdoors.
Dr. Pien says that while air purifiers can help with some allergens, it can worsen others like dust mites and mold because they thrive in humidity. When the temperature drops, confusion between allergies and viral infections go up.
This time of year, when people are staying indoors more, when viruses are more prone to become a problem, probably would be a consideration for some of their symptoms. So you're going to want to see, is it really my allergies or is it something like an upper respiratory infection?
Dr. Pien says it's important to keep temperature change in mind when traveling during winter months. She advises taking allergy medications before heading into a situation where allergies can be aggravated. I'm Dr. Manny, Fox News.
And this just in right now, a winner in the 143rd Kentucky Derby, Always Dreaming, pulled away from Looking at Lee to give trainer Todd Pletcher his second Derby victory at Churchill Downs. Always Dreaming was the favorite in early wagering. In fact, I myself bet on it, although I didn't actually spend any money. I just said I wanted to win. But anyway, soggy weather didn't dampen the party as thousands flocked to Churchill Downs for the biggest horse race of the year. Well, police are looking for suspects, and a family is searching for answers after a father of 5 dies in what appears to be a random attack in Las Vegas. The suspects were captured on surveillance video after sucker punching Louis Campos. He was knocked out cold and later died. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt is following the search for the attackers of this gruesome attack from our West Coast newsroom. Hey, Jonathan.
Hey, Julie. Louis Campos was simply waiting in line outside a Las Vegas nightclub, excited to be there with his brothers, looking forward to one of them getting married, a wedding at which Louis was going to be the best man.
And he was just so happy to be with us. You know, we're all close brothers, but this is one of the first times we got to really hang out together.
Minutes later, everything had changed. These two men, seen on a nearby security camera after the attack, approached the Campos brothers, and one allegedly threw an unprovoked punch that sent Louis crashing to the floor. 4 days later, 45-year-old Louis Campos, a father of 5, died in the hospital, having never regained consciousness.
To see his wife laying over his body just broke my heart. His kids. It's the worst. When he was born, it was the happiest time of my life. And now, this same child is the saddest thing in my life.
Now, the Campos family just wants justice.
That guy murdered my son. He was a husband, a father to 5 kids. And he was my best friend.
In the video, they're clearly walking down the street and gloating about it, and the guy looks like he's so proud of himself, you know? And it's just sickening to me.
Sickening to everyone, and a family that was planning a wedding is now, Julie, preparing for a funeral. Julie?
Let's just hope they catch these people. All right, thank you very much. What a sad story, Jonathan. Well, we now know the name of the American Navy SEAL killed in action in Somalia. Kyle Milliken was a 15-year veteran who had been awarded the Bronze Star 4 times. He was killed in an operation on Friday against the terror group Al-Shabaab as a U.S. aircraft delivered Somali troops to the target area west of Mogadishu. The 38-year-old was from Falmouth, Maine, and is the first American service member killed in Somalia in nearly 25 years. More protests in Venezuela, where thousands of women are making their voices heard, and now the Trump administration is weighing in on all the chaos. What do they have to say? Plus, will a Texas police officer be convicted of murder in the killing of a 15-year-old boy? What happens next now that prosecutors have brought charges?
I honestly began to cry because I just did not believe that things could actually work the way that they're supposed to. I think that a little bit of the burden is starting to lift because it's a complicated situation. You're battling losing a child, having to prepare the arrangements to lay him to rest, yet in the back of your mind, you're still wondering what's going to happen to my child's killer? What is going to happen to him?
A Texas police officer has now been charged with murder in the shooting of a black teenager. The 15-year-old victim was in a car full of teenagers who were leaving a party when the officer opened fire. Will Carr is live from Dallas. So, Will, this charge came quickly, didn't it?
It absolutely did, Julia. That may have diffused some of the tension that was building in this community leading up to 15-year-old Jordan Edwards' funeral, which took place today. His family members and loved ones came together for an emotional service. Take a listen to one of his close friends.
He was just a great kid. Like, there's nothing wrong with him. Like, he was just well-rounded.
Edwards was a standout football player and a straight-A student. He was in the passenger seat of the car that Roy Oliver fired multiple rounds into. Oliver was a 6-year veteran with the Balch Springs Police Department as well as an Army vet. He and another officer responded last Saturday night to a house party and say they thought they heard gunshots in the area, then saw a car filled with black teenagers leaving the property. Initially, the police chief said that the car was aggressively driving in reverse towards the officers, but video from their body cameras shows the car was driving away when Oliver pulled the trigger. That resulted in his termination Tuesday and the murder charge last night. Since 2005, 81 on-duty officers have been charged with murder or manslaughter. That includes 18 officers in 2015 and 13 last year. Earlier this week, you may remember, a former South Carolina police officer pled guilty after shooting an unarmed black man in the back. Then on Wednesday, the Department of Justice declined to charge 2 officers in the death of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. You may remember the cell phone video that sparked national outrage of that shooting. Sterling's family is now asking the state attorney general to press forward with charges.
And I'm just asking everybody to just step forward so we can continue to get justice, because it can't stop right here. We deserve it. If nobody else, we deserve it. So, Jeff Landry, please open up your heart, your eyes, and give us the justice that we deserve.
The new Black Panther Party protested in front of the Baton Rouge Police Department earlier today. Julie, that protest was peaceful.
All right, Will Carr, thank you very much. New details emerging on the Trump transition team's warning to Michael Flynn about his Russia contacts and what it means for multiple investigation now underway. Plus, could there be more boots on the ground in Afghanistan? The Trump administration weighing options as the war on terror grinds on in a stalemate. Details of the war plan ahead. Plus,
the White House has announced the first foreign countries President Trump will visit later this month. I'm James Rosen in Washington, back after the break with a look at the opportunities and perils these countries present.
I'm Julie Banderas. This is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour. Time now for the top of the news. The Senate is due next week to begin working on its version of a bill to repeal and replace Obamacare. That's after the House passed a measure on Thursday by 2 votes, delivering a victory for Republicans, but lots of uncertainty for the future of health care in America. Senators say that they will move with caution and demand a score from the Congressional Budget Office on the cost and the impact of the bill. Meanwhile, the White House says it expects changes so long as the main pillars of the deal don't get changed. After celebrating the House passage, President Trump visited his hometown of New York City for the first time since taking office. And this weekend, he's at his golf club in New Jersey, continuing to talk up support for health care. And on the eve of a presidential runoff election, France is investigating a cyber attack against candidate Emmanuel Macron. Hackers posted what appear to be stolen emails and fake information from Macron's campaign. He's up against far-right candidate Marine Le Pen. Well, now new revelations about former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and his Russian ties. Reports say Flynn was cautioned by the Trump transition team not to talk with Russian officials. That warning made weeks ahead of the call that ultimately led to Flynn's resignation. This expected to be raised at the Senate hearing on the Russian hacking on Monday. And Garrett Tenney joins us now live from Washington to wrap it up for us. So, Garrett, why were some transition officials concerned about Flynn meeting with Russian officials?
Well, Julie, they were particularly concerned about Russia's ambassador, Sergei Kislyak, because of his ties to Russia's intelligence agencies. According to the Associated Press, transition officials warned General Flynn that Kislyak was almost certainly under surveillance by the FBI and the CIA. Current and former officials told the AP that Flynn didn't seem to take those warnings very seriously, though, and that one transition official even asked the Obama White House for a copy of the CIA's classified profile on the Russian ambassador for Flynn to know exactly who he was dealing with. The officials didn't know if Flynn ever looked through those documents, but we do know that ultimately he and Kislyak did meet and had a series of conversations. At least one of those conversations was picked up by U.S. intelligence agencies, and it included discussions of sanctions against Russia, which Flynn later lied to the vice president about and was eventually forced to resign over. Julie?
So then how cooperative are Trump associates being with lawmakers in their investigations into Russia?
Well, there are at least 3 congressional looking into Russia's involvement in our election, and until yesterday, current and former Trump aides have fully cooperated with those efforts. But now, the heads of the Senate Intelligence Committee are saying former advisor Carter Page is changing his tune a bit. On Friday, Page informed the committee that they likely already have records for most of his communications, thanks to the Obama administration's surveillance operations. His letter states in part, "Any records I may have saved as a private citizen with limited technology capabilities will be minuscule in comparison to the full database of information which has already been collected under the direction of the Obama administration." Page also went on to say that he still plans to fully cooperate and that he looks forward to testifying to clear his name. Monday will be a big day for the Senate Judiciary Committee's probe into Russia, though, when former Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates is scheduled to testify. Investigators believe Yates will be able to share a lot of insight into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn's ties to Russia, because it was just a few weeks before his dismissal that Yates warned the White House that Flynn could become a security risk and be vulnerable to blackmail to Russia by lying about his conversations. Julie?
Garrett Tenney in Washington tonight. Thank you.
You got it.
New protests in the Venezuelan capital, this time with thousands of women taking to the streets. Watch. The women marching against the socialist government, which has now been seen 5 weeks of near daily protests. Many of the demonstrations have erupted in violence, leaving more than 30 people dead. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, addressing the situation, saying, and I quote, "The Maduro regime must respect Venezuela's constitution and the voice of its people. We are particularly concerned that the government is failing to provide basic food and medical needs to the Venezuelan people." Trump's national security advisor, meantime, H.R. McMaster, met with Venezuela's National Assembly president at the White House yesterday. They agreed there is a strong need to bring the crisis to a quick and peaceful conclusion. President Trump now planning his very first trip overseas. During the 9-day tour, he is expected to visit Israel, the Vatican, and Saudi Arabia later this month. Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen has the story.
2 weeks from now, President Trump will touch down in Riyadh, the first leg on his first foreign trip, which will then take him to Jerusalem and the Vatican, ahead of G7 and NATO meetings in Europe. Senior U.S. officials said Saudi Arabia is the first stop because of its preeminence in the region and because it is the birthplace of Islam, custodian of its 2 holiest sites.
And it is there that we will begin to construct a new foundation of cooperation and support with our Muslim allies to combat extremism, terrorism, and violence.
Saudi officials told Fox News it is unprecedented for an American president to meet, as this one will, first with the Saudi king, then with allies on the Gulf Cooperation Council, then with scores of Arab and Muslim heads of state converging on Riyadh to welcome the new president and the promise of reinvigorated U.S. leadership in the region, which the Saudis and other Arab allies considered grossly lacking under President Obama.
We believe that President Trump is a man of a strong character and conviction. We believe that he has vision. We believe that he has courage. We believe that he is decisive. We believe that he is unconventional in his thinking, not tied to traditional thought patterns, which makes him creative.
Aides said that in Jerusalem, Mr. Trump will do Mideast diplomacy differently this time, but offered no details as to how. Analysts said if successful, the trip will achieve 3 goals: shoring up alliances against al-Qaeda, ISIS, and Iran, making headway on the Israeli-Palestinian issue, and recasting the president as sensitive to world religions, eliminating the charge that he is anti-Muslim.
President Trump has made clear that Iran is the enemy, and the Saudis and the Israelis are our friends, and I think under President Obama, it seems sometimes the other way around.
Fox News has learned that during President Trump's visit to Riyadh, his royal hosts will announce major investments in American businesses, and that the stop in Israel will entail some engagement by the president with the Palestinians as well. In Washington, James Rosen, Fox News.
The Pentagon wants President Trump to authorize more troops to Afghanistan as the 16-year war drags on. 3,000 more troops as the war settles into bloody stalemate with the Taliban. Pentagon officials told Congress this week they will send plans to the White House intent to move past that. They say Afghan soldiers are suffering high casualties and the prospects are dwindling for a negotiated peace deal with the Taliban, who continue to hold or influence a growing amount of territory. So as the debate over health care heads to the Senate, insurance companies have been relatively silent on how the Republican bill to repeal and replace Obamacare would ultimately affect their industry, an industry that thrives on stability. Doug McKelway has more.
If you owned a car, had no car insurance, and this happened, no prudent insurer would cover you retroactively and pay for what might be called your car's pre-existing condition. Yet, in its most simplistic form, that is what health insurers have been asked to do under Obamacare, and may be asked to do with a Republican replacement. As the creator of America's first insurance company, Benjamin Franklin would have understood this problem.
And he actually charged people who lived in wooden houses more than he charged people who lived in brick houses because they had a higher risk of having a fire. That's what insurance is about, spreading the risk over population.
Like cars or buildings, people with pre-existing conditions are more expensive to insure. The compassion they may deserve does not undo the hard, cold math for insurers, and may explain why no insurer would agree to an interview with us today.
This is a situation where they can't win. Under the current law, they're departing the marketplaces. There are 5 states where there's only one insurer. A third of all counties, there's only one. Premiums are going up. So they're losing there. They can't make any money.
That, despite lots of taxpayer help to cut insurers' losses, subsidies in the form of cost-sharing reductions, tax credits, risk corridors, and high-risk pools. Despite all that propping up of insurers in Obamacare, this map shows the losing battle. The areas in orange are counties that are down to one health insurance provider. To many Democrats, the math doesn't matter.
If Republicans have their way, Americans with pre-existing conditions will be pushed off their insurance and segregated into high-risk pools where they will face soaring costs, worse coverage, and restricted care.
The irony is that Republicans seem intent on adopting some of the same components of the health care law they once disparaged.
They were bailouts when it was a Democrat idea. Now it's a Republican idea. They keep sweetening it up.
Our trouble as a nation is the bill's too big. And that's not the insurance company's fault. That's the doctors, the hospitals, and all those other providers.
A former insurance company executive recently wrote, quote, "There are 2 things that health insurance companies hate to do: take risks and pay claims. But it's also the very essence of their business and will be demanded of them no matter how the health care bill takes shape." In Washington, Doug McKelway, Fox News.
For more on all things healthcare, be sure to tune in to Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace will be sitting down with White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. Make sure to stay tuned to that. Well, what does it take to protect the President of the United States in one of the busiest cities in the world? I found out firsthand. Put your hands up. Did I get them?
You did, but
You're going to go behind the scenes with me and New York's finest as they roll out a massive operation to keep the president and those around him safe.
Our viewers in New Zealand watching on Sky, thank you for choosing Fox. For more, go online and check us out, foxnews.com and foxbusiness.com. Keep it right here.
From niche to trend.
Seaweed is becoming less foreign to a lot of people, and now there's actually people harvesting it off the coast of California and off the coast of Maine, so it's readily available.
Restaurants and cooks are taking cues from Japanese and Nordic chefs and adding seaweed to their menus.
Seaweed's actually been used by traditional cultures in all different parts of the world because it's a great source of nutrients.
And the variety of sea greens is vast.
They all have slightly different flavors, like nori seaweed is a little more toasty tasting because it's actually a toasted seaweed. Dulse is smoky. Arame is mild and briny. Kombu is actually a flavor enhancer, so it doesn't actually have a strong flavor.
It also doesn't hurt that seaweed is packed full of nutrition and health benefits.
It's very rich in various minerals. Calcium, for example, and magnesium, iodide. If you eat it a few times a week, you're going to add a lot of minerals to your diet.
Fish actually get omega-3 fatty acids from eating algae and seaweed.
In terms of fiber, in terms of the type of fatty acid that it has in it, the long chain N3 and N6 or omega-3 fatty acids ratio, which is really in the right range, is quite a superfood to me.
Sea vegetables have also been found in recent studies to be a promising source of protein, as well as cancer-fighting antioxidants.
Seaweed and longevity is another area of research that scientists are looking at.
So whether you use it as a main ingredient, like a salad, or for a bit of extra flavor, seaweed could be a great alternative.
Sea vegetables have a really lovely briny taste, and it might take a little bit of getting used to at first for some people that don't like that flavor, but when it's combined with sweet flavors of onions or mirin, the Japanese cooking wine, it can really have a very satisfying, delicious taste.
Recent studies have shown farming seaweed has a very low impact on aquatic ecosystems, plus, even better, it helps offset ocean acidification caused by carbon emissions. In Miami, Phil Keating, Fox News.
Massachusetts police say a man suspected of shooting an officer has been found dead in a motel room. The incident unfolding late Friday night when apparently police arrived at a Motel 6 just south of Boston to check the warrant status of the 25-year-old suspect. They say he opened fire, hitting one officer in the head and then barricading himself inside the room. Authorities later found him dead from what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Police say the officer who was wounded may have to go and undergo a second surgery to remove the bullet, but miraculously he did survive. A sinkhole large enough to swallow a truck, a flatbed truck carrying bags of cement, was partially engulfed in San Francisco. The driver says he had to wait for the truck to stop sinking before he actually could escape. The cause of the sinkhole is under investigation. No one was injured, and repairs should be done by Monday. When the President of the United States comes to New York City, keeping him safe is a top priority. Earlier this week, the city launched a massive security operation to prepare for President Trump's very first visit to his hometown since taking office. But providing that kind of security for the occasion requires many layers of NYPD resources and highly trained units at the ready. And I got an exclusive behind-the-scenes first-hand look at what it all entails. For the first time since it began in 1845, the New York City Police Department is tasked with protecting a U.S. president who calls the Big Apple home. An enormous responsibility, but like no other police force in the world, the NYPD is up for the job. Among its active force of 36,000 officers is a team of 1,500 men and women devoted to one job, counterterrorism. And with the president's first visit this week since getting elected, the job becomes that much more critical behind the scenes to not only protect the president, but to protect this great city and its millions of residents.
We're protecting the president of the United States if he's in residence, working for the Secret Service. Two, when he's not in residence, we're protecting protecting a building that went from being one of the buildings on Fifth Avenue to what could be argued is now a symbolic target.
A job that takes intense training and many layers within the NYPD.
Whether it's the Counterterrorism Bureau, which is the bomb squad, the radiation detections, the network of camera systems, the explosive detection dogs, the biohazard detection devices, or the Intelligence Bureau, which is the investigations, the sources of information.
Layer 1, officers armed with long guns visible to the public guarding Trump Tower. Together with the Secret Service, the Counterterrorism Critical Response Command Teams, or CRC, have President Trump's every step covered. Layer 2, the not-so-visible NYPD counter-sniper team. And we got an exclusive behind-the-scenes look at how they train using a magnified scope on an M4 assault rifle.
And so at the 200 yards, that magnified scope allows us to center in on a target and crosshair a target at 200 yards, just as if it was 25 feet away. We prepare everything from a hostage situation, so where we would take that 200-yard shot up to that 200-yard shot, anything from a perp search, a man with a gun, so we can protect our team as they walk in.
Using simulation training, officers are placed in real-life scenarios, armed with virtual weapons from a handgun and mace to a baton and taser. Here, I'm responding to shots fired and have been told there's an active shooter inside a New York City bodega. I find bloodied bodies on the floor. The lesson in these scenarios is not to overreact, but to be ready to use force if needed. I draw my gun, but it's too late. I try again. Next, I respond to a forced entry and burglary. I encounter someone inside. This time, I'm ready. After refusing to follow orders, he raises an object at me. I shoot. Put your hands up. But was it the right move? Did I get him?
You did, but that was just stapler.
An eye-opening reminder of the intense pressure trained police officers are under every day, knowing it takes just 1 second to make a life or death decision. And Layer 3, an eye in the sky. Sniper teams are not the only counterterrorism layer the NYPD provides. In fact, heavily armed officers or ESU teams are at the ready to rappel from helicopters like this one, either onto the ground or onto rooftops. The Emergency Service Unit, or ESU, not only has a Plan A, B, and C in place, there's a Plan D. These teams are trained to respond to the unpredictable. In a scenario requiring force, officers can deploy from a helicopter onto any platform anywhere in the city within minutes. So, as you can see, a tremendous resource in terms of people and costs. Officials estimate it costs just under $150,000 daily to protect Trump Tower alone. That daily cost doubles to about $300,000 when the president is in town. The good news, though, Congress announced this week it has approved a federal budget to reimburse the city the tens of millions of dollars it's already spent since campaign then candidate Trump became president and foot the massive security bills moving forward. We want to thank the NYPD for giving us that exclusive look and the men and women here keeping our big and beautiful city safe. Well, country music legend Loretta Lynn is expected to make a full recovery after suffering a stroke at her Tennessee home Thursday night. Based on her official website, the 85-year-old singer and songwriter will remain in a Nashville hospital tonight. And doctors recommend for her to stay off the road as she gets better. Until further notice, all upcoming scheduled shows will be postponed. Marking 80 years since the tragic crash that shocked the world, how New Jersey is remembering the 36 people killed in the Hindenburg disaster. Plus, an update on the hazing death of a 19-year-old college student, the charges some fraternity members are now facing. Next. Prosecutors announcing criminal charges against 18 Penn State students and a fraternity over the hazing death of 19-year-old Tim Piazza. Tim Piazza was a sophomore from New Jersey who died after falling down a set of stairs during an alcohol-fueled pledge night. Leah Gabriel has the story from our New York City newsroom tonight. So, Leah, the first arraignment hearing was yesterday. What did we learn?
Well, Julie, fraternity members forced the sophomore pledge to run a drinking gauntlet and take in excessive amounts of alcohol. That's according to prosecutors who say that after Piazza had fallen multiple times, the so-called frat brothers then commented he looked like he was dead, but they still waited hours before calling 911. Timothy Piazza died from a traumatic brain injury on February 4th. To put it in perspective, his blood alcohol level was 5 times the state legal limit for drivers. A grand jury report says it was at this frat house where Piazza fell down a flight of stairs twice and hit his head repeatedly. Fraternity members tried to cover up what happened that night, even played down how badly they thought Piazza was injured. But the report says security camera footage showed frat members put a backpack loaded with books on him to try to keep him from choking on his vomit, that they poured liquid on him, slapped him, and shook him, and that they even tried to dress him before finally calling for help. Piazza's dad says that they disregarded moral values.
In honor of our son, and are committed to doing everything that we can to assure that no other parents will have to go through the pain and grief we are currently experiencing.
The Beta Theta Pi fraternity and 8 of its members were charged with involuntary manslaughter. If convicted of these charges, they could face up to 5 years in prison, Julie.
All right. And Penn State's president apparently called the details of what happened sickening and incomprehensible. But he thinks what caused Timothy Piazza's death is a national problem, and that the university actually disbanded the fraternity, right?
Yeah, Julie, that's right. The university disbanded the fraternity in late March, saying that it had a pattern of hazing, drug use, and excessive drinking. Take a listen.
We are going to do everything we possibly can. If people are willing to hide that type of behavior and protect that level of secrecy, I do not see how it is the university will ever know that it's happening, and that any rule that we make will stop it.
Well, the university says that because fraternities are privately owned and on private property, there's not much that it can do besides removing the recognition. Well, the first 10 defendants were arraigned yesterday and released on bail. And Julie, the others will be in court next week. Some are facing lesser charges, including hazing and aggravated assault. Julie.
All right, Leah, thank you very much. Well, today marks 80 years since the very start. Ben, we're going to skip that story and go on to another. A zebra on the loose. They just killed stories in the middle of my reading, so I apologize for that. You'll never believe where, though, the zebra's on the loose. We'll have to stay tuned to find out.